Ebony Jackson stepped into the spacious hall of her boutique, enjoying the soft jazz music playing in the background and the gentle shimmer of the displays. The store, as always, was immaculate. Polished wood, marble floors, and elegant lighting created an atmosphere of refinement. This was one of her favorite boutiques in her chain, located in a prestigious area of the city. Today, however, she decided to visit not as the owner, but as an ordinary customer. Ebony believed in the importance of staying involved in her business. She announced no plans to visit and came alone, wanting to see for herself how her employees treated customers. Today, she had chosen a modest yet stylish look: a gray pinstripe suit, comfortable flats, and a leather bag. Her hair was neatly styled, and her makeup was minimal. She knew she blended in with the crowd, which was exactly her intention. As she entered the store, she immediately noticed how the staff interacted with customers. A young woman behind the counter was helping a man select a watch, while another employee assisted a customer with silk scarves. Ebony walked toward the display, featuring a new collection of handbags. Her attention was drawn to an exquisite crocodile leather design crafted by Italian artisans. She picked it up, examining the stitching and hardware for quality. At that moment, she caught the eye of one of the managers, a tall white man in his 40s with impeccably groomed hair. He gave her a once-over, and something in his gaze surprised her, a mix of disdain and suspicion. She had seen that look before, but never expected to encounter it in her own store. The manager decisively approached her, holding a tablet in his hand. "Excuse me, ma'am, may I help you?" he said in a cold tone, almost formal, but lacking genuine friendliness. Ebony smiled. "Thank you, but I'm just browsing," she replied calmly, continuing to inspect the bag. "I'm sure you understand that our store is meant for those ready to make serious purchases," he said, narrowing his eyes slightly. "If you see something you like, I can suggest more affordable options." Ebony raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. Her examination was interrupted by his next remark. "I must ask you to avoid touching the merchandise unless you intend to buy it." Her face remained calm, but internally she felt a wave of cold indignation. "Am I breaking any rules?" she asked, maintaining a neutral tone. The manager crossed his arms, his gaze growing sterner. "We noticed you took that bag from the display. You must understand that these items require special handling. Please be careful." By now, several other customers had started to take notice, their attention drawn by the manager's raised voice. Ebony saw that no one else in the store was being scrutinized, even though several other people were also handling merchandise. She placed the bag back on the display and looked directly into the manager's eyes. "It seems to me you're overreacting," she said calmly but firmly. His tone sharpened. "I'm simply maintaining order in the store," he said, "and I ask you to follow our policies. If you wish to continue browsing, be prepared to have your bag inspected before you leave. That's standard procedure for customers who raise questions." Ebony took a deep breath, feeling the tension build. She noticed a young staff member standing nearby, seemingly trying to avoid the conflict. However, the manager had already captured everyone's attention. Collecting herself, Ebony turned back to the manager. "Fine," she said. "Then let's address this matter legally. Would you prefer to call security or the police? I'd be very interested to hear how you explain your, grounds." Her words, spoken in a calm but firm voice, caused the manager to hesitate momentarily, but he wasn't ready to back down. "We have sufficient authority to conduct checks. If you've done nothing wrong, you have nothing to fear." The situation was drawing more attention. A few customers looked visibly uncomfortable, and one woman even whispered to her companion, "She looks completely normal. This is just absurd." Ebony surveyed the store. She noticed that some employees were discreetly watching the situation unfold, but were too afraid to intervene. possibly fearing for their jobs or simply unwilling to get involved in the conflict. Gathering her composure, Ebony turned to the manager. "Are you certain you want to continue this?" she asked, her voice calm but carrying an undertone of authority. "Because you might not like where this is going." Her words hung in the air like a quiet warning, but the manager seemed oblivious to the fact that this encounter was about to take a turn he hadn't anticipated. Ebony tried to maintain her composure as she continued browsing the displays, but the tension in the air was palpable. She could feel the manager's cold, suspicious gaze following her every move, like a predator unwilling to release its prey. Other customers in the boutique glanced her way, drawn by the rising confrontation, their quiet murmurs amplifying the discomfort. Still, Ebony wasn't one to give in easily. The manager clearly wasn't ready to let the matter drop. He approached her again, this time standing uncomfortably close, and spoke with a practiced friendliness that barely concealed his persistence. "Ma'am, I'm just doing my job. Our merchandise is extremely valuable, and I must ask you to show the contents of your bag to rule out any misunderstandings." Ebony turned to face him, her expression a mix of surprise and controlled irritation. "Misunderstandings?" she repeated. "Excuse me, but on what basis are you making these assumptions?" "You have to understand," he said, shrugging slightly. "Not every customer fully appreciates the value of our items. We can't take any chances." Her voice remained calm, but there was a steely edge to her tone. "Are you saying that I look like someone who doesn't understand value, or are you implying something else?" The manager seemed to ignore her pointed question. Instead, he turned to a young staff member standing nearby, summoning him with a curt nod. "Jason, please review the security footage from the last few minutes. I have reason to believe this customer may have taken something without paying." The young man, Jason, looked visibly uncomfortable, but nodded reluctantly and hurried off toward the office. It was clear he didn't want to be involved, but felt he had no choice. Ebony took a deep breath, feeling her patience beginning to wear thin. "Are you serious? You're trying to humiliate me in front of everyone based on your suspicions?" The manager shrugged again, his face a mask of indifference. "This is standard procedure. If you haven't done anything wrong, you have nothing to worry about." The confrontation was now attracting even more attention. Several customers were clearly uneasy, while one woman whispered to her companion, "She looks completely respectable. This is ridiculous." Ebony looked around the store. She saw some employees discreetly observing the situation, their faces a mixture of curiosity and unease. None of them seemed willing to intervene, likely afraid of jeopardizing their jobs or simply unwilling to involve themselves in the unfolding conflict. Pulling herself together, Ebony turned back to the manager. "All right," she said, "then let's handle this the proper way. Would you like to call security or the police? I'd love to hear how you justify your reasoning." Her words, spoken with a calm authority, caused the manager to hesitate briefly, but he quickly regained his composure. "We have sufficient authority to conduct these checks. Refusing to cooperate will only make this worse." The situation had reached a boiling point. Other customers were now watching intently, some openly frowning at the manager's actions. Ebony noticed their reactions, but her focus remained unwavering. She took a step closer to the manager, meeting his gaze with quiet confidence. Her voice dropped slightly, carrying an unmistakable note of warning. "Are you sure you want to keep going down this road? Because you clearly have no idea who you're dealing with." The manager crossed his arms again, his posture still defiant. "I know I'm protecting the store's interests," he said, but there was a flicker of doubt in his tone. At that moment, Jason returned from the office, looking even more nervous than before. Sir?" he began, adjusting his tie nervously. "I reviewed the footage, and there's nothing to confirm your suspicions." The manager scowled but didn't respond immediately. Ebony, sensing the shift in the situation, decided it was time to take control. "Good," she said, addressing Jason with a nod. "Thank you for clarifying that. Now, perhaps we can move on?" But the manager, despite the evidence, wasn't ready to back down entirely. He turned to Ebony again. "We have other ways of verifying things. Maybe you could just explain why you're here today?" Ebony felt a surge of resolve. The time for playing along was over. She met his gaze with an expression of calm authority and said, "I think it's time for you to hear my explanation. I promise it'll be far more interesting than you expect." Her words carried a weight that silenced the murmurs around them. Still, the manager remained oblivious to the fact that he was no longer in control of the situation. A heavy silence hung in the air of the boutique. The manager, though visibly less confident than before, still clung to the illusion of control. He seemed determined not to let someone he had deemed a problematic customer escape his scrutiny. Ebony, however, remained calm and composed, knowing full well that the tide was about to turn. She stepped forward, closing the distance between herself and the manager. For a brief moment, their eyes met, and she noticed a flicker of unease in his expression. "So," she began, her voice calm but laced with steel, "you want me to explain why I'm here? Fine. But before I do, I have a question for you. Are you absolutely certain that your actions align with this store's policies?" The manager, trying to recover his poise, nodded quickly. "Of course. We have every right to question customers if we have reason to suspect a problem." Ebony offered a faint smile, one that carried no warmth. "Excellent. Then I think it's time I explain what's really happening here, because clearly you have no idea who you're dealing with." She turned her gaze to Jason, who was still standing nearby, visibly uncomfortable. "Jason," she said kindly but firmly, "could you please call the store's general manager? I believe their presence will help us clarify this situation." The manager frowned, his expression a mix of confusion and irritation. "There's no need for that," he interjected. "I'm the acting manager here, and I make the decisions." "Manager?" Ebony repeated with a hint of sarcasm. "That's interesting, because I thought a manager's role involved showing responsibility and respect toward all customers. But it seems I was mistaken." Around them, the other customers watched with growing curiosity. The tension in the air was almost tangible as they waited to see how this confrontation would unfold. Some of them began to suspect that Ebony's confidence came from a place of authority the manager hadn't yet realized. Jason hesitated, unsure of what to do, but Ebony remained patient. She took a step back, her gaze sweeping across the store. "Allow me to clarify something," she said, her voice carrying a quiet power that silenced even the whispers of onlookers. "This store we're standing in, do you know who owns it?" The manager blinked, clearly taken aback by the question. "This store? Well, of course it's owned by the company. What does that have to do with anything?" Ebony held his gaze for a moment longer before delivering her next words with deliberate precision. "That's correct. This store is part of a company that I own." Her statement landed like a thunderclap. Several customers exchanged surprised glances, and Jason's eyes widened in disbelief. The manager's expression froze, a mix of shock and confusion washing over his face. What did you just say?" he stammered, his voice suddenly quieter. "You heard me," Ebony said, her tone steady and calm. "I own this company and every boutique in this chain, including this one. I came here today incognito to see how my employees treat customers. Congratulations. You failed spectacularly." The silence in the boutique deepened as the weight of her words settled over everyone present. The manager opened his mouth as if to respond, but quickly closed it again, his face pale. Jason stood frozen, clearly unsure how to react. I didn't know," the manager finally managed to say, his voice trembling. "I didn't realize." "No, you didn't," Ebony cut him off, her voice unwavering. "But that doesn't excuse your behavior. You chose to humiliate me publicly, based solely on your own biased assumptions. That's unacceptable. She turned to Jason, who seemed eager to distance himself from the situation. Jason, please arrange for a meeting with the general manager. I'll need to discuss today's events with them. And as for you, she said, turning back to the manager, I suggest you wait for me in the office. We need to have a serious conversation about your future in this company. The manager, now completely deflated, nodded weakly and slinked toward the office, avoiding eye contact with anyone. Customers murmured among themselves, some shaking their heads in disapproval of his actions. What had started as an opportunity for the manager to assert his authority had turned into a very public reckoning. The manager stood frozen for a moment before silently retreating toward the office, his confidence shattered. His previously smug demeanor was replaced with visible humiliation. The murmurs of customers filled the boutique, their voices a mix of astonishment and quiet judgment. Ebony remained calm, her expression composed but firm. She had no intention of letting this incident pass without action. Ebony took a deep breath and turned to Jason, who still looked unsure of how to proceed. Jason, she said gently, don't worry. You handled yourself well. Now please contact the general manager. Let them know I'd like to meet with them here. Jason nodded quickly and hurried off, eager to escape the lingering tension. Meanwhile, Ebony turned her attention to the customers who had been watching the scene unfold. Her gaze landed on an older woman holding a silk scarf who offered Ebony a warm smile. You handled that so gracefully, the woman said softly. It's not easy standing up to someone like that, but you did it with such dignity. Thank you for what you did. It matters. Ebony gave a small, appreciative nod. Thank you, she replied. Respect should be the foundation of every interaction, whether it's with a customer, a colleague, or anyone else. That's something I firmly believe in. A few minutes later, the general manager of the chain, Henry, entered the store. He was an older man with a calm, professional demeanor and an air of experience. His sharp eyes immediately took in the situation. Approaching Ebony with an extended hand, he offered a polite smile. Ebony, it's good to see you, he said. Though I wish it were under different circumstances, Jason filled me in on the situation. Can we discuss this in your office? Of course, Henry, Ebony replied, gesturing toward the back of the store. I think we have a lot to talk about. In the office, Ebony recounted the events of the day with calm precision. Highlighting the unprofessional and biased behavior of the manager, she emphasized the importance of fostering a culture of respect and fairness in the company, both for customers and employees. Henry listened attentively, nodding in agreement at every point. The manager sat in the corner of the office, his head lowered. After a long silence, he finally spoke. I realize I made a mistake, he said quietly. I didn't think I acted wrongly. I want to apologize. Ebony looked at him with a steady gaze. Her tone was measured but firm. Making mistakes is human, she said, but what matters is how we address them. You need to reflect deeply on your actions and how they align with the values of this company. Respect for every customer is not just a policy, it's the core of what we do. Until you truly understand that, I can't keep you in this position. The manager nodded, his face pale. He seemed to understand that his behavior had cost him his job, but respected Ebony's directness. Later that evening, Ebony returned home, feeling both exhausted and satisfied. She was settling into her evening routine when her phone rang. It was Henry. Ebony, he began, I just wanted to thank you for personally stepping in today. Your actions reminded everyone why you're such an effective leader. I've already started reviewing our internal policies, and will ensure we hire a new manager who aligns with the company's values. Ebony smiled as she listened. She knew that her intervention, while difficult, had been necessary. Thank you, Henry, she replied. This isn't just about one person. It's about ensuring that everyone who comes into our stores feels valued and respected. As the call ended, Ebony reflected on the day. It had been a challenge, but she had upheld her principles and reinforced the importance of respect and fairness. Justice, she reminded herself, always has a way of prevailing when you're willing to stand for it.